Uh, okay,
I
so
have
let's get
started the recording, sir.
recording. Superb, superb. So let's get started. Welcome, Soma, to the call, and thank you for joining. Good evening, good morning, folks. A couple of things. There is a program that should be run on the side. I will talk about that shortly. But welcome to the CEG Sea Level Connect series. This is the number 18th session in the program. We started this program in August 2021. On August 15th, the Indian Independence Day in 2021, and since then we had an 18 sessions with 18 CEG alumni and alumnus from all over the world. We had some exceptionally great speakers, and today we have yet another exceptional speaker, Somasegar from the 1986 batch of CEG ECE. Usually we do the call on a Saturday or a Sunday, but this time because of the holiday period, we are doing it on a Wednesday for the first time. So hopefully it will work out well. So today is Wednesday, December 21st, 2022. A few guidelines for the session. Please stay muted during the fireside chat session. So Soma and I will be the only one with our audio turned on. All of you would request you to turn off your audio. Also, please turn off your video. At one point towards the end, I will ask all of you to turn on the video again so we can take a picture of the screen. But until such time, please turn off your video. The entire session is going to be recorded, Soma. So we will have people who are not able to join today can also watch the program, which will be published in a few days from now in our public YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is called CEG Connect. If the audience have any questions while the program is going on, please use a program called Slido. And I will talk about the Slido program in just a minute. Uh, and we can use Slido program to ask your questions. Slido also provides the ability to me as a host to do periodic live polls. So I can poll the audience in terms of feedback, questions, etc. All that. So when the poll comes up on the screen in Slido, I request you all to please participate in the poll and respond to the questions. And during the Q&A session, if your name is called, if you had put a question in the Slido or in the chat box and a name is called, please unmute, open your video and audio, and please ask your question. So today's guest speaker is Mr. Somasegar, CEG 1986 Electronics and Communication Engineering. He is currently the managing director of Madrona Venture Group, a venture capital firm based in the Pacific Northwest of the US. Soma previously is known for his very long stint as a corporate vice president in Microsoft, and he is very well known in the tech circles in the US as well as in India. I am the host, 85 Mech from CEG, and Partha, the technical support. He is CEG 2021, and he's the one who's responsible for all the technical website and all other operational matters regarding this program. So today's program, we can what you should do is go to any web browser, whether it is in a laptop, desktop, mobile, tablet, etc. You can type slido.com, and once the Slido screen comes up, you can type in this number 2912329. So the screen, once you type, will come and look like this. So you should be able to get to the screen once you type that number. So you have a Q&A tab and a polls tab. You can toggle between that. In the Q&A tab, you can type your questions anytime during the program. I will be able to see your questions, and the polls tab is where we will see the polls that I published there. Okay. Okay. Just 1 second. Okay. So that's all I had. With that, I'll start presenting and then I'll hand it over to Soma. So Soma, just you have take another 15-20 minutes and talk a little bit about your journey. Now, some of my guests have asked me to even give time to talk about a journey prior to CEG also. If there is something that is relevant and interesting that you would like to communicate to the audience, you're welcome to start from even before CEG time. But mainly the point is to give you a life story and specifically focus on the learnings and experiences that you would like to share that could benefit the students and the alumni community. So over to you, Soma.
Thank you. Wish, first of all, congratulations on what you're doing with CEG Connect kind of thing. I think the opportunity to sort of, bring the alumni group together in another fashion, I should say, is been fantastic. And I've been watching, some of your talks over the last year, or maybe now year and a half, or even longer than that kind of thing, that you've been hosting. I think that's a phenomenal service, and I hear from other CEG alumni about how valuable they find these sessions. So thank you for taking the time and the energy and the effort to do this kind of thing. And also thank you for giving me the opportunity to be sort of able to talk with you as well as with some of our other friends from CEG in this forum. Okay. I sort of always fondly remember the 4 years that I spent in CEG from 1982 to 1986. I think we overlapped some wish both there as well as later on at Buffalo, but
Yeah.
I'll come to that in a second kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, it was both a fun, but more importantly, a formative period of, you know, most everybody who's gone through the college kind of thing, those 4 years. And I had a fantastic time, both in terms of the lifelong friendships that I built while at Guindy, but also the, like, what I call the foundation for, like, you know, who I am and what I am today and what I've been able to do in my life. I think a big thanks to all the professors and the environment that CEG provides. I left, you know, I left CEG in 1986, and I would say at that time, like, at least I was one of the few people that felt that, like, hey, if you want a great opportunity, you should sort of go abroad. Okay. I think in some sense I could say I was myopic because, like, there were great opportunities back then in India, and as you know today, it's like, you know, it's sort of, you know, exponentially increased in terms of the opportunities available for people graduating from schools and colleges kind of thing. But for some reason, I'd always wanted to sort of see, like, hey, let me go abroad for my higher studies kind of thing. So in 87 January, I left India and came to Louisiana State University to do my master's. And like every what I call middle class or lower middle class Indian at the time, it was all about, like, hey, how can I study more? How can I study more kind of thing. So after I finished my master's, I started my PhD at Buffalo. And that's where we overlapped a little bit as well, Vish. So I came to Buffalo to start my PhD. And then I had what I call the first, you know, crossroad in my life where I really had to make a decision about, like, hey, what do I do now? Because after joining Buffalo and starting my PhD program, I did get a job offer from a pretty unknown company, I should say, at that time. Okay, a small unknown company in Seattle called Microsoft. This is back in, like, you know, 1988. Okay, you know, before the rest of the world sort of appreciated the power of software and what the PC revolution could do, kind of thing. And I had to decide, like, hey, what do I do? Do I sort of give up my studies and go join this company that I don't know much about, other than, like, you know, they have a toy operating system called DOS, and that was the only thing that Microsoft was known for back in 88 time frame? Or should I, like, you know, dutifully finish my PhD and then worry about everything else kind of thing? And today, today, if you talk to today's generation, they'll tell you, like, hey, why are you even wasting time and making this a big issue kind of thing? But back then, it was a big issue for me. Okay. And my parents were like, oh, you're like, now you're halfway through the PhD program, why don't you finish it kind of thing? And my heart was like, hey, I'm getting to work in systems programming or system software in a great new, relatively newer company. What should I do kind of thing? And I did decide to leave my PhD halfway through with the, what should I say, with the fond hope that, like, hey, someday I would go back and finish, and I could tell you it's been a pipe dream till then. And I do want to thank CEG again, because, like, I think CEG took pity and said, like, hey, about 20 years later, they said, why don't you come on over? We'll give you a honorary doctorate kind of thing. Because I never got my PhD, you know, through normal means, and that's how my work journey started here in the US and at Microsoft. And so why did I decide to join Microsoft? Like, you know, to me, like, you know, there are probably three big reasons. The first reason was when I went to interview at Microsoft, there was the first time I was interviewing with a US company. And I got a chance to meet about, like, you know, 9 different people during the course of a day. Each one of them was about an hour-long conversation. And mostly, like, you know, hey, go to the whiteboard and start writing a program or start solving a problem kind of thing. But the thing that impressed me the most was, like, you know, all the 9 people that I met, I thought were incredibly smart. They were smart about software, they were smart about programming, they were smart about problem solving. And I felt like, you know, hey, if this is a slice of what the rest of the company is like, I really would be super excited to be a part of this company, because I thought I could learn from this group of people quite a bit. So that was the first reason that it got me excited about, like, hey, should I even join Microsoft kind of thing. The second thing is, you know, I was halfway through my PhD program and sort of realized at that stage that, like, you know, hey, I'm not going to be a researcher in my life. Meaning that's not what my passion is, and I don't know that I want to be a teacher or a professor as well. So, and back then, at least, the notion was, like, when you do a PhD, you either think about an academic life or you go into a research lab like the Bell Lab kind of thing. And I said, if neither of those are super interesting to me, what am I doing here? And then the third thing, which you'll probably appreciate this more than anybody else, after coming from Chennai, you go to Buffalo and you spend a winter there, and you sort of wonder what the hell you got yourself into.
Exactly.
So after a winter, I said, like, my God, like, do I need to really spend 3 more winters here to get my PhD kind of thing? It does sound somewhat trivial when you talk about the weather and stuff like that, but it was a big factor in my decision, at least back then. So for these reasons, I decided, like, hey, I'm going to join Microsoft. And then, as they say, like, the rest is history, right? I did get a chance to spend about 27 years at Microsoft, working through a variety of products and technologies and businesses, and growing through the ranks, so to speak, and scaling with the company. Just a fantastic opportunity. Okay. Uh, the thing that I always keep in mind when I think about, like, hey, how do I spend my time? Because I do feel that everybody ought to be asking this question of themselves. There is a particular way you're spending your time, and if you're excited about how you're spending your time, then that's the best thing you're doing. And if you're not excited about, like, how you're spending your time, then you better be changing that day, not the following day, not sometime in the future. And wish to go back to your sort of personal story. I really appreciate what you've done over the last few years in terms of shifting from what you call corporate America to sort of spending more and more of your time giving back to the community and to the society in one way, shape, or form. And, like, that just speaks volumes to, like, hey, you decided that, like, you were spending your time a particular way. You felt that you reached a stage in your life that you want to spend it differently, and you took the bold move and saying, like, hey, I don't care about, like, what the rest of the world is saying or thinking or advising. I'm going to follow what my heart does, right? And that is really, really important for everybody to keep in mind. And sometimes, like, when we are busy in the middle of our careers, when we are, like, hey, thinking about, like, how do I get my next promotion, or how do I make my next $1 million kind of thing, you tend to forget about, like, hey, are you happy with how you're spending your time? So that has always been something that I have thought about. Okay. The other thing I would tell you, like, and this is one thing that I learned, at least through my career at Microsoft. Each and every one of us, no matter what we are doing, whether we are running our own company, or whether we are working for somebody else, or whether we are sort of giving back to the society, we all have what I call a finite amount of time and energy. Okay. And we all have a certain set of expectations and responsibilities, sometimes that we put on ourselves, and sometimes that others put on us. Okay, particularly if you're working for somebody else decides, okay, here are your goals, please go deliver against them. But there is a set of expectations, right? And I've always believed right from day one that you need to figure out how you're going to effectively manage your time, so that you get done with what is expected of you, either by yourself or by people around you, with about, like, 80 to 90% of the time that you have, and reserve at least 10% of your time, if not a little more than that, for things that you can do above and beyond what is expected of you. Okay. To me, I've always believed in that. I've always tried living that way. In fact, from my own experience, I should tell you one thing that I started doing at Microsoft, given this is, and remember, like, whatever is expected of you, you better do a very, very good job of that. And that is just table stakes. That is just bread and butter. Everything else is, gravy on top of that. And so earlier on, like, at Microsoft, today, like, this is, people will laugh when you hear this, particularly in a post-pandemic world where, like, hybrid work is sort of the norm. Like, people want the flexibility to be able to work from where they are when they want, but still sort of within the guidelines of what is expected of them at work. And you look at all this and say, hey, how do we manage our time, and how do we do things in the most effective way kind of thing, so that we do a good job of time management, both for what we need to do and for what we can do above and beyond kind of thing. So in the early days at Microsoft, Microsoft believed in a culture of, like, hey, if I see you, I trust you, and if I don't see you, I don't know who you are, I don't care about you, right? And this was true particularly for the Microsoft workforce. We had sort of built this culture of, like, hey, the whole world, like, will be so excited to want to work at Microsoft that they'll all come to Redmond, Seattle. Okay. And so we had, like, we didn't think about, like, hiring people from elsewhere. I mean, hiring people and leaving them elsewhere. We didn't think about distributed development. We didn't think about, like, hey, remote work and stuff like that. Okay. And that was the culture that we had. But even in the early 90s, I sort of realized that, like, hey, the rate at which Microsoft's aspirations are and the way at which Microsoft is scaling, there is just no way in hell we are going to be able to attract the best talent from anywhere in the world and tell them that everybody has to come to Redmond. Some people will be open to come to Redmond, and a lot of people will not be open to come to Redmond. And you'll have to decide if you want the best talent, that you go where the talent is, as opposed to expecting for all the talent to come to where you are. So I'd said, like, hey, how do we get the culture of distributed development at Microsoft? And that was one of the things I said, like, I'll do in the 10, 15, 20% of my time, apart from my day job, so to speak, right? And the net result is, by the time I left Microsoft about 7 years ago, we had, like, probably about, like, 20, 25% of our workforce, or at least the product workforce, sitting outside of Redmond. Okay. And that took a long time to sort of go through the transition. And today, Microsoft is as global a company or as distributed development a company as anybody else kind of thing. But it did take a whole bunch of time to get there. Okay. And so in the process, I helped set up, like, the R&D center that Microsoft has in India, helped set up the R&D center that we had in Israel, the R&D work that we do in China, the R&D work that we did in rest of the US and in Canada kind of thing. So there was a personal and fulfilling thing for me to have done well at Microsoft. So after 27 years at Microsoft, I said, like, hey, what do I do here? Do I spend the next 27 years at Microsoft, or do I do something else kind of thing? And the reason I thought about it was, going back to my earlier comment about, how do you want to spend your time? I always ask the following, 4 questions, or 3 questions, I should say, at the time. 3 questions at the end of every year, which is, am I having fun at what I'm doing? Am I having the kind of impact that I want to have through my work, whether it is in my environment or the world at large? And then the third thing is, am I continuing to learn so that I'm not, becoming stale? If those 3 things are there, then I feel like, hey, I'm doing the right thing. More recently, in the last decade, I added a 4th question to that, which is, hey, if I look at all the opportunities around me that are available to me, am I doing the best thing that is going to help me answer an absolute yes to the first 3 questions? Or is there something different that I should be doing that is going to be even more resounding yes to the first 3 questions? Okay. And I started feeling after about 26 years at Microsoft that, like, hey, if I look at maybe 5 years or 10 years, I can probably, like, have the same level of energy and excitement and enthusiasm at Microsoft. But do I have it for the next 25 years? And I started feeling like, hey, I don't know that I'm going to be there. And if I'm not going to be excited, I didn't want to wait any longer than that day to say, like, hey, I need to find something completely different to do that is going to give me the energy, the learning, the impact, opportunity, everything else that I care about. And I was starting to think about, like, what would I do differently? And I had this sort of what I call a myopic view at the time. Even today, I sort of believe in that, which is, hey, if I left Microsoft, I did not want to go work for somebody else. Meaning, if working in a company, working for somebody is going to be a key thing that I care about, I might as well have stayed at Microsoft, because Microsoft is as good a company, at least from my perspective, as any other company in the world. And why sort of waste time thinking about moving and all that stuff? The fact that I'm thinking about moving meant, like, I want to do something completely different and did not want to work for somebody. And you look at, like, hey, what are the options available for somebody like me with my experience and my background, and how to build on top of that and not have to work for somebody? One of the things that I thought of was, like, hey, maybe I could sort of, be a venture capitalist, working with the next generation of entrepreneurs and using my whatever little experience and knowledge I have about technology and building products and being able to build businesses and scale businesses. I thought might be a good opportunity, but I didn't know what venture capital was. And I always say this, like, hey, don't hesitate to take a bet if that's what your gut tells you should do, right? So I said, hey, I think, I should go learn what it means to be a venture capitalist. Maybe I'll do a great job. Maybe I'll fail miserably. I don't know, but I wouldn't know that until I try it. So let me go try it. And so 7 years ago, I decided to move away from Microsoft and get into venture capital. And I've been a managing partner at Madrona Ventures since then. And I would tell you, like, 7 years later, I can't tell you that I know everything about venture capital, but I'm still learning a lot, but having fun. And the kinds of companies and the kinds of entrepreneurs and the kinds of technologies that I get a chance to participate in, they are sort of exciting for me. I feel like, I'm having an amazing amount of impact. And I can sort of squint and see, like, why I could be doing this. as long as I'm productive, as long as I'm able to be, able to learn and have an impact with people, kind of thing, right? So that's sort of a little bit about the journey and some of the learnings that I've had over the last many years, kind of thing. And let me pause here and see if people have any thoughts or questions or comments, or whichever direction you want me to go from here, I'll go.
No, I think it's good, Soma. I think you covered quite a bit of very important learnings along your journey. It's very important. I couldn't stop to think about the parallels we had. We both were in Buffalo. I joined the PhD program and quit after doing masters because of the same reason. I got a job in American Airlines. I thought maybe I should just go do work, and also another reason to get out of the cold weather and go to a warm weather. And I ended up staying in the same company in America for 21 years. And then eventually running the region of Asia Pacific for them. So a lot of parallels. So I can relate to every single aspect of your journey very well. But your point about being in Microsoft and doing it's quite nice. To understand the culture, why it made you stay there, etc. All that. I think a lot of our audience today, Soma, are people who are entrepreneurs.
Fantastic.
And many of them are kind of waiting to ask you questions about the future of startup world, entrepreneurship, venture capital, what's going on in the US and the tech world, etc. All that. So what I will do is that I will hold on to my questions. I have a few questions I wanted to ask you, but I want to first hold on to them and allow the audience, if somebody wants to make a comment or ask a question, and then we'll take it from there. I already have 3 questions lined up in the queue. So perhaps I can start with one of them, and then we can see how it goes from there. So the first question is from Mr. Ramakrishnan. Can you please unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, good evening, Somasegar. This is Ramakrishnan. I was with Sonata Software. The company grew because of Windows 95. And in charge, that was my first task. I'm basically a mainframe man, IBM DB2 kicks. And launch at 1,000 people. I was damn thrilled to be part of that presentation, asking how they will use the front end to take care of all the big mainframes, data, etc. My question is, how you thought about new products like CRM or Great Plains or what is that, SharePoint Portal Server? I say that I told my Sonata MD, this is the way we should come out with new products. How Visual Basic, Visual C++, SQL Server, like that. I wanted some input on that.
Got it. So first of all, thank you for being a great ISV for Windows. Windows 95 was a flagship product for Microsoft, and it sort of, in some sense, catapulted Microsoft into really being known as a Windows company kind of thing. I think Windows 3, Windows 3.1, and then ultimately Windows 95 was sort of a turning point in the company's history. So thank you for your work on that platform and being that platform successful. I would say, it all comes back to what is the vision that you have, and how big can you dream? When Microsoft started, just to give you a perspective, I don't think the company knew what they were doing. Okay, and it was Bill and Paul, the 2 original founders of Microsoft. They thought that there was an opportunity because hey, these things known as microprocessors are starting to get some level of excitement and energy. And somebody needs to build a set of tools for other people to be able to write programs and take advantage of the microprocessors. So the very first product that Microsoft had was actually a basic interpreter for the Atari chipset. Okay, and at the time, the only belief that Bill had and Paul had was, hey, as the microprocessor revolution becomes big and large and meaningful and scale, there is this thing called software, and the power of software is what is going to drive all of the innovation moving forward. Okay, and at that time, remember, until then, you had the mainframes and the mini computers were starting to come along, but nobody really paid attention to the software. It was just taken for granted that hey, you buy a machine, a big honking machine, and you pay for that machine, and by the way, there is something that is powering that machine and it's running called the software, but nobody thought about software as a standalone business. Okay, and here Microsoft was an upstart saying oh my god, it's all about software, we really don't care about hardware. In fact, we don't want to get into hardware, and we don't want to do anything with hardware, because we believe that the future is all about software, right? So that's the start that we had. And it's always been Microsoft's dream to say hey, we are not going to restrict ourselves to be an operating systems company or a desktop, application company, or like, a ERP company or a CRM company or a database company or this or that. Microsoft always thought of itself as a software company, and any and all problems that could be solved through software that is going to be widely required and widely used is something that Microsoft sooner or later wanted to get into, right? So that mindset, unlike some other companies that said like, hey, I'm a database company, so they sort of were naturally constrained to thinking about like, hey, what can I build as far as databases go? What can I build in terms of database platforms, database tools, applications that run on the database? So they sort of had a little narrower view of the world, whereas Microsoft was always about software and how we can use software to help people to be more productive, right? So every product that we've done and everything that we've done over the years has been around how can we sort of continue to further that mission? Like, why did we do products like Visual Studio and Visual Basic and Visual C++ and C# and .NET and everything? It was all about saying like, hey, we want to make developers productive, and what kinds of tools and technologies and platforms and services that we need to build. Take like your White Plains and like CRM and everything else. It was all about saying like, hey, we got a platform, a great platform in Windows. What kinds of business applications can we be building and delivering to the world so that the enterprises of the world can be more productive? So it was always like geared around, we want to focus on software, we want to focus on productivity, and it doesn't matter, we are not going to put any more constraints on ourselves, kind of thing, right? So that's what gave rise to the multitude of products and services that the company has and we built over a period of time.
Excellent, sir. Thank you, Somasegar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So the next question is someone who didn't put the name. Can a student asking the question? Can you please unmute and ask the question? Okay, I don't know they're asking. So let me ask the question. Soma, it's someone. I'm a final year student at CEG, and I'm contemplating whether to go to US for higher studies, or join a tech company or MNC in India, or become an entrepreneur? Question mark. I presume asking you a question. I think I'm not sure that exactly.
No, I think that's a great question, and a question that I'm sure.
Someone has
Go ahead.
their hand.
So go ahead. Go ahead, Soma.
Okay. So, in my mind, that's a great question. It's a great question because every student, I'm sure, who is sort of going through the third year or fourth year of engineering is asking themselves this question, kind of thing. And I can tell you that like the answer lies within you. Like I can give you my perspective, but my perspective is going to be different than your perspective. And you'll have to do what you feel is right for you, given where you are and what your aspirations and goals are. Okay. I can tell you a couple things that may help you think through this. One is like, and Vish and I were talking about this before this session started. Like, go back to 85, 86 when we were sort of coming out of Guindy, and look at like, 2023 and 2024 when the next generation of people are coming out of Guindy. The world is a vastly different place. Okay. And one thing that is like, very stark in a positive way and different today is that like, for you to be an entrepreneur, the barrier to entry is as low as it has ever been in the history of the world. Okay. For a variety of reasons, including the rise of the cloud, the availability of resources, the cost of starting a startup and being an entrepreneur is very low today, as opposed to 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 30 years ago, kind of thing, right? So if you are excited about like hey, going and being an entrepreneur and starting your own company, you should go do that. Okay, people who tell you, oh, why are you taking a risk? Like, why don't you join an established company, a technology company? You'll get a great paycheck, a great pay package. Life is good. You're just starting your career, and that's fine. So it really depends on like, hey, what are you most passionate about? What is most interesting to you, and what is your risk reward profile looking like? And for the right set of reasons, all the options that you talked about are great options, and you'll have to sort of go through the thinking process to decide what is going to be best for you.
Super, Soma. Let's go to the next question in the series here. Naveen, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Sure. Hey, Soma. Hi, this is Naveen, and I'm a CEG 2011 pass out, and currently I'm an...
Naveen, can you show your video as well, please?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, Naveen.
Hey, yeah, I'm a 2011 pass out, and currently I'm an engineering manager at Facebook. Firstly, I want to say like you're a great inspiration to all the CG folks out there.
Nice.
One being me. The question I want to ask is like, how did you get introduced into the world of venture capitalism, and how was the transition like when you made the switch from a corporate world into a completely different domain? I would say like, just wanted to hear your thoughts and.
Great. I think that's a great question. I should tell you, like, starting around 2000, okay, I should say from 99 actually, during the height of the dot-com era, okay, and then post the dot-com era, the dot-com bust, and then, like, whatever else happened in the world kind of thing. If you look at what happened around 97, 98, 99, there was a mass exodus from most of the technology companies in the US, because everybody felt like, hey, I could go be an entrepreneur and be immensely successful, and more importantly, I can be successful overnight. Okay. The number of people that actually, at least on paper, created a tremendous amount of value in, like, a year or two or three was probably a record high in that time frame. Okay. And so a lot of my friends, were leaving Microsoft as well, and wanting to do their trying their hands at startups, and they would come and say, like, hey, I'm going to do a startup. I would like your support. Can you, give, can you invest in the company? So I started, doing what people fondly refer to as angel investing today, back in 99. Okay. And initially it was like, friends asking me, and I said, oh yeah, I know this guy, like, or I know this girl, let me sort of go, write a, check and support them, and who knows what will happen kind of thing, right? And before I realized, by the time 2010 rolled around, I'd already invested in about 60, 70 companies. And I should tell you, like, like most people might tell you, like, I probably wasted more money than I made money during that time period. Okay. But nonetheless, it was a fantastic learning experience to start to learn about, like, hey, what does the world of startups look like? Who are these entrepreneurs? What is differentiating a successful entrepreneur versus somebody who is not so successful? What is the problem space they are going after? How should I think about it, right? So it just started giving me a little more insight into what was happening in the world of startups. You fast forward to 2015, which is when I left Microsoft and became a venture capitalist. I should tell you that, like, I'm what I call an accidental venture capitalist. Okay. For example, if you had come to me and told me in 2014 that, like, hey, you're going to be a venture capitalist, I would have laughed you out of the room, because I didn't really understand venture capital. I knew a little bit about startups and a little bit about angel investing and some about venture capital, but I hadn't really delved into that industry to understand all the nooks and crannies of that industry kind of thing. And I thought, like, hey, I'm having fun building products. Why would I ever, like, go think about, investor kind of thing? So, but once I started thinking about, like, hey, do I see the next 20 years at Microsoft, or should I be doing something else? I started thinking about, like, the entire gamut of possibilities open to me, and one of them was venture capital. And the fact that I had a little bit of experience with angel investing and learning about startups and working with entrepreneurs, I thought there was enough there that I should go learn some more and decide if this is the right thing for me or not. So when I made the transition, it was more like, hey, it seems interesting. It seems exciting to be able to delve into a variety of technologies and work with entrepreneurs. I'll tell you one thing about entrepreneurs that I love. The common thing that binds all entrepreneurs in the world is they have this deep passion to change the world. Now, the reality is, some of them do. Some of them sort of, have a little bit of impact, and some of them don't. But the passion and the desire and the energy and the enthusiasm to want to change the world through whatever they are going to build and whatever they're going to deliver to the world, that is an infectious enthusiasm. And if you are in the middle of the day in and day out, I personally thrive in that kind of a enthusiastic, environment kind of thing, right? So getting a chance to work with entrepreneurs, getting a chance to dabble in a variety of technology. And I'll give you an example, right? One day we are talking about, like, hey, what does this self-driving technology look like for automobiles in the world? The other day we are thinking about, like, hey, how can we apply machine learning and data science to detect cancer? The third day we are like, how do we think about a therapeutics or a cure for cancer, right? The fourth day we are thinking about, like, hey, how do we reimagine, expense management in enterprises, right? Now, some things, like, get a little more energy from you, and some things maybe a little less, but the breadth of problems that you're solving using technology and the chance to be able to get involved in a variety of those, and the fact that you're, working with the next generation entrepreneurs, those were the sort of the key reasons why I said I'm going to try this out kind of thing. The other thing that happens is, when you move from sort of, running a product group or running a business in a company or running a company even to becoming an investor, the thing you need to realize first and foremost is this. You're literally saying that, like, hey, I'm going to get off from driving a car and I'm going to sit in the back seat. Okay. And I'm going to give the keys to the car to somebody else. The entrepreneur is the one who's going to be driving the car. You can opine, you can give input, you can give advice, you can write a check, you can give money, you can fire a CEO, you can hire a CEO, you can do all those things, but you are not operating the company. And you need to be ready for that transition. That's one important thing that I learned as I sort of made through the transition kind of thing. The other thing is, I was at Microsoft running, large organizations, running, managing tens of thousands of people. And I knew that if I went to venture capital, I'm going to be a lone warrior, meaning I don't have thousands of people working for me. I don't work for somebody else. Okay. But you'll have to be ready to say, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and I'm going to do the work myself and not expect an entourage of people to do everything that I want them to do. Okay. So you have to be ready to say, I'm willing to go back to being an individual contributor and know that I'm going to rely on what I'm able to do and be able to have the impact and create the kind of value that I want to create. Okay. The third thing is, as a venture capital person, you really are thinking about long-term relationships. We sort of joke about it and say, like, it's really getting into a marriage. When we invest with an entrepreneur, we are telling the entrepreneur that, like, hey, we are here with you for the long run. Okay. There are going to be, highs and lows. There are going to be days when we think the company is going to die or have a near-death experience. There are days when we are going to feel we are on top of the world. But it takes 10, 15, 20 years for you to really create enterprise value of some level of scale, and you're signing up for that journey. So you better be excited about the founding team and the management team that you're working with. You better be excited about the problem space that you're working with. Otherwise, you won't be able to withstand the journey, right? So think hard before you get into a relationship with an entrepreneur, because it's a long-term commitment, a long-term journey that you're signing up for, right? So those are some of the things that I learned as a transition from a corporate world to a venture capital world.
Superb. Very good. Very clear.
Thank you,
very
Ravi.
nice. Very nice.
Thanks,
So the next question, Soma, is from Partha Sarathi. Partha, what can you ask your question?
Sure. Hi, all. Good evening. So my question is, like, what's your advice to founders who is starting their company for their first time?
Yep, that's another good question. I think, for an entrepreneur who's starting a company for the first time or doing it for the first time, the most important thing in my mind is make sure that you're really, really, really passionate about the problem that you're trying to solve. Okay, because if you're not passionate as I just mentioned, there are going to be days when you won't have the energy to get out of the bed because, life looks pretty bleak. And there are days when you're going to be jumping up and down with energy because you feel like you're on top of the world, right? For you to be able to go through those highs and lows, you need to be passionate about what you're doing and what you're building. Okay. The second thing is, if you're passionate, you will do your very best. If you're not passionate, sooner or later, your energy levels are going to slow down and you won't be able to do justice to the product or the idea or the company that you're building. So be passionate about what you're doing. The second thing is, think about, hey, who your customer base is. Okay, who are you building your product or service for, and ensure that what you're building is something that they really care about, that they really are feeling a pain and you're going to solve their pain, and for which they are willing to open their wallet and say, hey, I'm going to give you some money because I see the value that you're providing. So you have to be really clear in terms of, the value that you're providing, the problem you're solving, and the customer who's going to be using your product and hopefully getting their problem solved is really excited and are willing to do this and are prioritizing that. And the third thing is, dream big. Okay, as I said, Microsoft, one of the reasons for why it is where it is, and you can talk about any large company today of that ilk, they all have, and sort of what I call infinite amount of vision for what they want to do, right? So dream big. But at the same time, know that, if you want to build a cathedral, you're going to build it one brick at a time. If you think, you're going to build a cathedral overnight, you're not going to get there. So you have to have a big vision, but really break it down into what I call building blocks and sort of smaller units that you can start making progress against, and show both to yourself and to the rest of the world that what you're building, it has a large vision, but it is finite, and it adds some amount of value for what you're trying to do today. So those are some things that come to my mind in terms of what first-time entrepreneurs should keep in mind.
Okay.
Oh, the other thing I should say is, you have to decide whether you want to be a single founder, or whether you want to have co-founders. And I'll tell you this, as the person running a company, your life is somewhat lonely, okay? Because no matter who you're talking to, you're always in a selling mode. Whether you're talking to a customer, whether you're talking to an employee, whether you're talking to a prospective hire, whether you're talking to your board, whether you're talking to your investors, whether you're talking to your key stakeholders, no matter who you're talking to, you're always wearing a selling hat and saying, like, how are you selling what you're working, so that you're both energizing as well as inspiring people to follow you. Okay. And that's a tough journey, because day in and day out, hour after hour, that's what you're doing. And you want to be able to have a safe conversation with people where you can feel vulnerable. You can talk about what is really bugging you and what are the challenges you have. And so having one or more co-founders is always a good idea. But know that, like anything else, this is another sort of marriage that you're getting into, right? You're going to be able to, take them into confidence. You're going to be vulnerable with them. They're going to be vulnerable with you. You're going to be telling them, your problems and challenges. And you know that when you walk out of the conversation, you have to go back to being the CEO and being able to, get into selling mode with everybody else, right? So having one or more co-founders that are trusted, that are trusted people around you is always a good idea, particularly if you're a first-time entrepreneur. But that works for a lot of people, and that doesn't work for some people. So you'll have to decide what works for you. But thinking about how to mitigate the loneliness that you're going to face in the journey, whether it is through a co-founder or through a trusted network of advisors or mentors or what have you, is going to be super important.
Super.
Okay,
So,
thank you so
Soma,
much.
Thank you.
at this point, I'm going to ask all the people to open the video. We want to take a screenshot of everyone participating. So if you all don't
Sure.
mind, just open your video. We'll continue with the questions, but we also take a picture while you're opening the video. So, Soma, I wanted to ask a question before I go to the next audience question. I know that you and your wife are very passionate about educating girls and women entrepreneurship and women education. Do you want to say a few things about what is the motivation there and what is the long-term objective of that particular mission?
Got it. Yeah, sure. We're happy to do that. So first of all, it starts with the fact that, my wife and I, we have 2 daughters. Okay. And I should tell you that, when we had our daughters kind of thing, we wanted to give them an environment where they could, do whatever they wanted to do, and not worry about constraints, and not worry about, hey, I can't do this, or the society would think about me this way if I do this or do that kind of thing. And so we wanted to try and bring them up in as unconstrained a way as possible, and give them all the options and choices, and let them decide what they want to do. Okay. And we thought we were doing a very good job at that, until one day, just so you know, our 2 daughters are still in school. When I say school, they are in college or they're post-college, but they're still in school. Our first one is a doctor. She's finished her MD and her internship, and she's currently doing her fellowship at Stanford. Okay. And then our second daughter finished her college, and then she started working. And after 4 years of working, she decided to go get a business degree. And so she's at Wharton doing her MBA now. So both are still in school in some sense. Okay. But our first daughter, when she was going through her MD program, one day we were talking about, hey, what do you want to do after MD? Which field do you want to, do your internship in? And where do you want to specialize in? What do you want to specialize in, kind of thing? And she said, for a long time, we thought she was interested in surgery. And she said, hey, I think I'm not going to go for general surgery internship. I want to try something else. And both my wife and I said, oh, what changed? What happened? We thought you were excited about surgery. Did something change? And then she said, hey, I'm starting to think about my work-life balance. Okay. I said, oh, what work-life balance are you thinking about now, right? She said, oh, someday, I'm sure I'll get married and I'll have kids, and I want to be able to do what is right for the family. And I may have to take a back seat in my career. And that day it hit us that, hey, there is the law of nature that you'll have to deal with. And that has its pluses and minuses and its constraints and sort of freedom. but it also reminds us that, like, hey, for everybody, they're going to have to make their life choices. As long as you give them the choice, right, as opposed to telling them thou shalt do only this or thou shalt do only that kind of thing. Okay, so it continues. So right from the day we had daughters, we had always felt that, like, hey, if this is what we want for our girls, why not think about this for every girl in the world? Okay, they should have the choice, and they can decide if they want to stay home, or if they want to go work, or if they want to go do something else, whatever it is, kind of thing. So that put us on a path of saying, like, hey, whatever little, and wish after listening to you, I think I need to go back and rethink how much more I should do, kind of thing. But whatever little we do today, we said, like, we'll focus in terms of thinking about how can we do our part to both help educate as well as empower girls around the world, kind of thing. And to be honest, my wife does a lot more of the work than I do. I'm just, like, silently standing behind her and supporting her in whatever she does. But that's sort of really, like, what got us going in this path.
Interesting. Another similarity was my daughter is also a doctor, and she was going to go into surgery. She decided not to do that and doing Master of Public Health now. At the exact same reason you said, she wanted work-life balance. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And the second one is in Google now, working for Google, and she of course has taken a different route and wants to be more into Google and do more corporate women style, like work living, etc. All that. But interesting. Okay, on the topic of startup founders feeling very lonely, you just mentioned that in the previous question. I just want to make a small announcement to people in the team here that recently I took a course and I got a degree in psychological counseling. And one of the areas I'm specializing in, or trying to specialize in, is to counsel C-level people and specifically startup founders. A lot of startup founders, as you said very rightly, are in a selling mode or a convincing mode, trying to tell people what they should, how things are going to work and how they should rally up behind them. But most often I find them not terribly happy inside, or stressed out and worn out, and sometimes actually depressed as well. So I decided that I would do it. And so as a specific give back to my alma mater, I decided that I will do counseling for CEG startup founders at no cost to them. That is my way of giving back to CEG to do that, actually. And believe it or not, I already got 3 people who already started counseling from CEG. So there is clearly some demand there for that, and doing that. So with that, I'll go on to the next question from the audience, Soma. The next question is from Anonymous. How was it working with Bill Gates? I was wondering how the question has come up so far.
I'll tell you, it was a great learning experience more than anything else, kind of thing, right? Bill, as most people or who has sort of read about Bill might know that, like, he dropped out of college, so he never really finished his degree. But Guindy or Anna University took a special care for me, kind of thing. Harvard called back Bill Gates and gave him a degree, finally, an honorary degree someday. So he can now say that he's got a diploma. But he sort of left with just his passion for software right from his young age, kind of thing, and a desire to want to change the world that got him to leave Harvard and say, like, hey, I'm going to go start a company in Albuquerque with my best friend, Paul Allen. Okay. And everything that he's learned is mostly like self-taught or self-learned kind of thing. And there is a small number of people who I think are extremely good, both on the technology front and on the business front together, right? You've seen like great technologies, you've seen great business people, but rarely you see the combination of the two, and that too at sort of superlative levels. And Bill is one such guy. And the thing about Bill is, like, you hear all these stories about, like, oh my God, he's a tough guy to work with. He's like, he can make you feel bad. He can shout, he can yell, he can do all these things, kind of thing. But up close, he's probably one of the most grounded human beings that I've come across, kind of thing, right? I think it is his curiosity to learn and his desire to win that sort of, and sometimes he shows those, he shows those things in ways that you wish, like, it can be a little polished, or it can be a little better in terms of human empathy and EQ and stuff like that. But I thought, like, it was a unique experience and opportunity to get to work with him for such a long period of time, particularly when he was at the peak of his, like, hey, working career, so to speak, kind of thing. And since then, we stayed in touch, and he sort of made his transition from being a a corporate guy to being a giving guy through his foundation and everything else that he does. And again, the way he approaches any problem that he's working on, okay, the passion, the wanting to learn, the curiosity to learn, and the ability to assimilate different inputs and make decisions. I think Bill is one of the best guys that I've seen, and I've had the unique fortune to sort of be closely working with him for many years.
Super, excellent. Excellent. The next question in the line, Soma, is from Raghu. Raghu, do you want to ask your question after unmuting yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Vish. Mr. Soma, pleasure talking to you. This is Raghu Raman from ECE 94, actually. Yeah.
Great.
And my question is, your opinion about this statement, whether the occupation chooses you or you choose the occupation.
in some sense, I think if you believe in destiny, you might say, one thing. If you are one of these guys that hey, I get to control everything, then you may say the other thing. In my mind, I would love to think that there are forces above you that may sort of guide you in a particular direction. But at the end of the day, I'm a believer in saying hey, that you have to choose and also be ready to accept the consequences. Because when you make a decision, sometimes you have choices, sometimes you don't have choices, but you make a decision given whatever knowledge and experience and information you have. And sometimes it is what I call complete, and sometimes it is not complete. But what you'll have to do is really think about hey, is this what my heart tells me I should do? And if so, you're going to do it. And whether it is good or bad or whatever it is, you're going to live with that. So own it, take it in your hands, and go forward.
Thanks, Soma.
Super. The next question is from Navneet. Navneet, do you want to unmute and ask your question, please?
Yeah. Thanks, Vish. Hey, Soma.
Hey.
I'm Navneet. I work in the HR tech space in the US, and I'm curious. You've invested in a couple of HR tech companies like Seacard. I'm just curious, what's your outlook for startups in the US over the next 2 years with the recession, and how can one go about managing their career in this environment?
Right. The good news or the bad news is the economic environment goes through cyclical nature, right? The last year has been pretty tough in terms of what's happening in the public markets and the private markets, in terms of inflation, in terms of interest rates, in terms of global dependency on things that are either good or bad. So no matter how you look at it, it's been a tough year since about the October of 2021, I would say, when the public market started, at least in the US, started heading down. Okay, and the technology sector and the life sciences sector, I should say, have been hit probably the hardest through this last year kind of thing. What we tell our portfolio companies, or the companies that we work with, or the companies that we've invested in, what we tell the entrepreneurs is two things. One is this too will pass. Okay. But it's going to be tough to navigate through this. So the thing you want to do is focus on efficient growth. In the past, the world had gotten to a stage where it was growth at all costs. Okay, as long as you can show great growth rates, no matter how efficient or inefficient you were in the process, what your customer acquisition costs were, what your CAC to LTV were, and stuff like that, it didn't matter. Growth was sort of supreme and was a king. That world has changed in the last 12 months. It's now all about hey, how do you draw the balance between growth and efficiency in growth? So we sort of advise our people to say hey, think about efficient growth. For example, right, if you think you could grow 60% year over year, but your burn multiple was 4x, okay, and if you can reduce your growth rate by let's say 5 points or 10 points, and your burn multiple became 2x, then probably you need to find that balance, right? You can't say growth at all costs. So and the reason efficient growth is important is because that's what the investors in the markets are valuing and prioritizing today. Okay, but the second and more important thing is raising money in today's environment is a little tougher than what it used to be a year ago. Okay, I would say a lot tougher, but it's tougher today. Okay, and the reason it's tougher today is because the expectations on multiples for what people are willing to value enterprises or companies is a lot different than what it used to be 12 months ago. So if you came in with an expectation that, hey, 12 months ago, I thought this was the value of my company, and today it is 50% lower or 30% lower or 80% lower, depending on where you are, you will have to give yourself enough time to make enough progress to try and work back into your valuation and go above that. Okay, you already started seeing, like, companies like Sneak announcing, like, hey, we are going to raise more money but at a lower valuation than the last round. So you're going to see that. You started seeing a lot of companies saying, like, hey, we need some more money to bridge us till we make more progress before we can raise the next round. So there's a lot of convertible notes and safe notes and bridge rounds and all those things that are happening, right? So if you are an entrepreneur at this point in time, making sure that you're prioritizing efficient growth and thinking about how you can extend your cash runway so that you can make enough progress before you can successfully raise money on the terms that you want to raise money at, those are important things to keep in mind as people try to work their way through this. The third thing, which is sort of little unknown at this point in time, is we don't know what the buying patterns are going to look like, particularly in Q3 and Q4 of this year. Most people are saying, like, hey, I'm starting to worry about budget. I'm starting to think about, like, whether I have budget for this particular project or for this particular technology or not. And that is going to reverberate throughout the ecosystem. And, like, if you thought you're going to get so much, revenue this quarter, you may be looking at, like, 10, 20, 30% below that. And so things are going to be volatile, at least for the next year. And you'll have to be able to navigate through that.
Interesting. This whole tech meltdown, Soma, in the last 3-4 months is incredible. I mean, we have a lot of people who are out looking for work. What I also hear from our own alumni in the West Coast is that they're also having difficulty finding talent. Very ironic that you have a whole bunch of people let go from some of the top tech companies, and people saying they're not able to find adequate. What is your take on that in the overall scheme of things?
Yeah. I do think it is a tough time because, like, what happens is, like, a bunch of companies say, like, they've overhired, okay, and so they are or they are not growing as fast as they can, or they are trying to keep costs or control costs kind of thing, and they are saying we need to shed some people. There are companies that are saying, like, hey, we need to hire people, but I'm looking for this kind of a person or that kind of a person. And you'll have to shift through all the noise in the system to find a good match. Okay, net unemployment rates are still sort of at a meaningfully low level. Okay, now can they shoot up more? Yeah, maybe they can shoot up more. So to me, it's about, like, being patient and trying to find the right opportunity. But it is tough. If I'm working at a large company, if I'm working at Facebook, and Facebook suddenly says, like, I'm one of the 11,000 people that got impacted, the shock to the system is huge, and I need to work through that and then go figure out, like, hey, how do I dust up my resume? Who do I talk to? And most companies, at least on the face of it, are telling me that they're not hiring, but everybody is hiring replacement people, at least, if not anything else, kind of thing. So there are opportunities, a little far and few between. The thing is to make sure that if somebody is impacted for whatever reason it is, that they hopefully have enough reserves to be able to take the next few months to work through this and find something, right? Sooner or later, things will get better. The problem is it going to be 2024 or is it going to be 2025 or 2026? Nobody knows, and everybody can take out their crystal ball and tell you, like, what they think it is, but the thing is nobody knows, right? So being able to, like, navigate through this in a thoughtful way, and everybody's situation is different, their family life is different, what they want to prioritize is different. But there are jobs, people are still being hired, while companies are laying off tens of thousands of people, right? So it's going to be a tough time. I don't know that I have anything more to sort of specifically say on the topic.
No, I understand. So next question is coming from Ashwin Raja. Ashwin is also a successful CG entrepreneur. Ashwin, can you go ahead and ask your question?
Yes, hi, Soma.
Hi,
good to see you, and yeah, and I'm a beneficiary of your investment in India Development Center for Microsoft. I joined as an engineer there.
Oh, great, fantastic.
In 2001, 2002, 20 years back. But my major learning there was I was able to help them grow from like 100 people when I joined to kind of 1,500 by the time I moved to here. So that was probably my biggest learning in Microsoft, being there when IDC was growing, and for Soma was the prime guy who started IDC and sponsored us. So I'm in small, trying to replicate that. I have Motork. We have an India Development Center. I'm the primary sponsor. In a small way, I'm doing what you did. But my question was, Soma, go from a growth phase, what do you think are important things that companies might miss when growing from hundreds of millions range to kind of want to be billions? We'd like to be $100 billion company, like the companies that you've helped grow over time. What do you think, from in the growth phase, 100 millions to getting into billions, what skills are needed? What are things that entrepreneurs might miss during that growth phase?
Got it. Yeah. I think people sometimes talk about this as strategy or culture kills strategy, right? To me, culture is really, 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 really important. Okay. Particularly when you're scaling from tens of people to hundreds of people to thousands of people to tens of thousands of people kind of thing. Being clear about hey, what is the culture that you want to keep in the company? What is the environment you want to create for people to be able to do their best, and how do you let that scale as more and more people come into the organization and not destroy the culture, so to speak, kind of thing, right? That I think is really important and something to keep in mind. And there are companies that have lost their way along the way because their culture hadn't been strong, or they sort of missed staying grounded on that as they scaled. And there are countless examples that we can talk about, that have happened in the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years kind of thing. And so culture is one thing to keep in mind as you scale the organization. The second thing is it's all about hey, what your vision is and whether you are executing really well against your vision. Okay. The only constant in the business world, or in life I should say, is change. So you should expect change all the time. It's going to be the technology landscape is changing, the market is changing, customers' expectations are changing, the competitive landscape is changing, and you have to be agile enough to be able to understand all of these things and be able to navigate and be willing to disrupt yourself. Okay. I would say these things are some of the things that come to my mind about what companies and people and entrepreneurs should keep in mind as they scale to continue being successful and relevant. I'll give you from Microsoft's example. We have been a well-named, well-thought of technology company over the decades kind of thing. But I would tell you that in particularly the 2000 to 2010 timeframe, we got to a point where we were at risk of becoming irrelevant. And for a technology company, more than anything else, if you are relevant, you are on top of the hill. If you are irrelevant, you are dying slowly, right? And we ran into some culture problems. We ran into execution problems. We ran into some lack of agility problems, and we had to figure out how to dig ourselves out of that hole. But this happens to all companies. So and the classic example I can tell you is and this also shows you my age kind of thing. When I grew up, IBM was the king of the hill. Okay, and we used to think no customer ever got fired because they took a bet on IBM technology. Okay, and IBM could do nothing wrong. Okay, today IBM is still a large company, still has $100 billion plus market cap. There's still a lot of people working in IBM, a lot of people taking a bet on IBM technology. But I can't tell you that any one person in this world would tell me that IBM is the technology leader today. Okay, and so you'll have to think about, as companies scale and grow, how do you keep the culture, keep the vision, keep the execution, keep the agility going, so that you continue to stay highly relevant to what people need today and what you're building today, not what you did yesterday. That doesn't matter. Everybody is always asking, what are you doing for me today? Not what have you done for me yesterday, right? So that's the thing to keep in mind.
Super. So a couple of questions, Soma, before we wrap up. It's a little bit behind time. Ganesh Venugopal, do you have a question? Can you please ask a question? Ganesh?
Yeah. Hi, Soma.
Hi,
name
Ganesh.
is Venugopal.
Hi, man.
Yeah. EC84. I was in tech space. Now I run a ESG consulting firm. I'm based in Hyderabad. My question to you is, you are a VC now. How much importance do you attach to ESG component when you invest in projects?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And
I mean, there's a talk now that a lot of investment that is happening now Yeah, sorry. Yeah, please.
No. So I would say that ESG is continuing to increase in what should I say, in importance and priority today than yesterday, than before. Okay. In fact, we raise as a venture capital firm, we raise a new set of funds every 2 years or 3 years kind of thing, and we just finished raising our new set of funds about 3 months ago or so, and we went through the fundraising process this year. And earlier we were talking about how the macroeconomic climate has not been great this year, and so we were a little worried when we started the process earlier this year. But thankfully we got a lot of support from our LPs, and we were able to be oversubscribed and finish raising our money. But the important thing during that fundraising process that we learned was every LP of ours, the question, one of the key questions they asked was, "Hey, how are you thinking about ESG, and what are you keeping in mind when you make investments?" kind of thing, right? So that just shows how important it is in people's minds in terms of what they're thinking about from an ESG perspective. Okay. I would say that we have invested in a couple of companies that are doing something in the ESG space, let alone thinking about ESG components. Okay. But in general, we are starting to think about hey, as companies get to a certain level of scale, when they are very early, it's hard to talk about ESG because they are they got hey, how do I get enough money to buy the next loaf of bread is where they are, so they can't think about anything beyond. But once companies reach a particular level of scale, we want to make sure that ESG is a core part of how they think about what they are doing and what impact they can have kind of thing. And so from a governance perspective, we think about ESG for at scale companies quite a bit. But sometimes, most of the times, just so we invest in early stage companies there are usually one or two people with a slide deck and nothing more, and it is hard to say hey, ESG is going to be a priority at that stage. So we wait till the company gets a product in the market, gets to some level of scale, and then we start thinking about how do we overlay ESG on that.
Super. So one last question, Soma. A question that is always a question that is expected. What is your call on crypto space? Anonymous person. With the context of FTX disaster in the background, I think I want to answer the question.
Yeah, unfortunately, it just shows you how early the industry is and what regulations or lack of regulations could do if a bunch of bad actors or people even with good intent but bad practices, how much grief and loss it causes to people around the world. And I think an FTX is a good example. Okay. But in my mind, I think first of all, I want to separate out the world of Web3 or blockchain from crypto. Okay, they are in some sense very closely tied or intertwined kind of thing, but they are two different worlds. Okay, we are big believers in Web3 infrastructure. Okay, we believe in blockchain. We believe in this notion of decentralized transaction model, and we think there is a class of problems that could be solved through that, and we made a bunch of investments in Web3 infrastructure companies. Okay, from a crypto perspective, I think crypto has emerged as sort of the killer application for Web3 so far. Okay, I think the challenge is going to be you got a universe that is running through centralized banks pretty much in every country, and then there is this upstart crypto that is trying to shake that and disrupt that and tell the world that there is a different way to think about monetary value and monetary policy and monetary management kind of thing. At some point in time, I think those two have to come together. Okay, and so far I haven't seen how they're going to come together in a way that is going to be beneficial to all. At the same time, you think about the amount of value that the crypto world has generated. It's sort of a non-trivial. It's sort of depending on the day, it's either trillions or hundreds of billions of dollars. Okay, and there is a lot of money flowing into that. My own view is people sometimes refer to the current period as the next crypto winter, because prices are falling down. People are not sure whether there is a future or not kind of thing. But I think 2023 and 2024 is going to be a time when crypto stabilizes, and they'll continue their journey to figure out what I call product market fit. Okay, for all the progress that crypto has made, I don't think there is product market fit yet in a way that it is going to be scalable and sustainable for the long term in terms of mainstream usage. And that I think they're going to continue the journey to try and figure that out. And hopefully they'll figure that out, because for us and for for the crypto world to realize the full potential, we need to figure that out. If we can't figure that out, sooner or later it'll die.
Yeah.
But there is so much energy and so much investments and so much money going in that I'm hoping that we'll continue the journey to figure out the product market fit for crypto.
I think the interesting thing about NFTs, 6 months ago, NFTs were the next best things in sliced bread. All of a sudden, they vanished from the face of the earth. The amount of
because anytime you can't really articulate the value of something, okay, in a way that you and I can understand, it's I worry about the long-term viability of it. Either we are going to get smarter and understand that, or the system is going to change. And with NFTs, it sort of had an unreasonable amount of hype and volatility. And in the crypto winter time, that sort of gone by the wayside.
Yeah. One thing I want to ask Soma is that one of your areas of interest in investing, apart from AI and deep tech, is multi-sense user interface. I'm curious, what is that? What is a multi-sense user interface?
Here is the way, I used to say this, and it's becoming lesser and lesser true, which is, as human beings, right? We talk to each other, we see each other, we touch each other, right? Those are the ways we interact with people. Okay. But when it comes to a machine, we've historically interacted with keyboard and mouse, and more recently with the touch screen. Okay. The natural language, whether it is vision or whether it is voice, we don't for the most part interact with machines. Now with Alexa and Siri and everything else, and voice recognition taking on a bigger role, we are starting to, but still very sort of nascent in my mind. To me, there is no reason why I shouldn't be interfacing with a machine or with software the same way I'm interacting with a human being, which is through vision and through voice, right? Sometimes people refer to this as ambient computing, right? But instead, I have to come sit in front of my computer. I have to sit on my desk. In my desk, I have to use a keyboard and mouse today for the most part, and that's not a interesting way, because that's unnatural for human beings, particularly when human beings interact with other human beings in a particular way. So to me, this natural language, okay, whether it is and virtual reality and augmented reality is sort of taking us one step forward in the direction. But being able to interface through normal, natural ways of interfacing that human beings are used to is what I refer to as multi-sense.
Interesting. A lot of talk about AI, and specifically in the context of large learning LLM models and ChatGPT and all that. A lot of hype around that, a lot of excitement around that, and a lot of amazing things it can do as well. Any thoughts on ChatGPT and what is the applicability of that in real world?
I think, like you said, ChatGPT 3 is probably the most talked about technology. And actually, if you look at the amount of time it took for the first million users of ChatGPT 3, it's just mind-boggling. How in just a few days, you had millions of people using GPT-3, maybe just for the fun of it or just to sort of see what it is kind of thing. But the mind share is just huge. Yeah. In general, I would say we are big believers in what we call intelligent applications. Okay. In fact, I would tell you that if anybody is building an application today or a service today, if they aren't thinking about data and ML and AI, and they're just building a regular SaaS, service, I think they are going to die. Okay. I think software, there is going to be intelligent software which thinks about building a continuous learning system, which looks at the data that it has access to and trains, with ML and AI, and make it continuously better is the only way that I think software is going to survive and thrive. Okay, so if you take that worldview, generative AI, right, is something that we are big believers in. Whether it is text generation, or whether it is image generation, or video generation, or multimodal generation that incorporates all of these elements kind of thing, we think that is going to be the next big thing. You are right in that it is very hyped currently. But I also think that this is one of those things where on the one hand, I can tell you it is super hyped. On the other hand, I would say it is underhyped. Okay. Meaning it is super hyped among the technology people who are sort of, into technology and understand technology. But for the vast majority of the rest of the world, they really don't understand this yet because they don't use it. They don't see the benefit of it yet. Right. So in my mind, next year, I think you're going to see it becoming a little more mainstream. More people around the world starting to use it and starting to see the benefits. The number of people who told me recently that hey, I think my kid is going to be able to write their school project much better. The generative AI is huge, right?
Yeah.
Now, how much is it going to help them versus how much is it going to hurt them because they lose some of the basic skills that you and I probably grew up with? I think we'll have to sort of learn. I'll give you another example. I was giving a talk at the University of Texas at Austin a few years ago. Okay, they had invited me to talk to the computer science people there, so I came and gave a talk. And the end of it, I had a session with the faculty members, their head of department, and that head of department gave me a pretty tough time. Okay, his input to me was like, "Hey, you're screwing up the world by building products like Visual Studio and Visual Basic." Okay, and his point is like, because you're raising the abstraction layer, my students are no longer learning, what pointers mean.
I see.
Okay, because you're taking that load of the programmers, and you're providing a managed environment for them, right? So as you think about increasing the abstraction levels, whether it is Visual Basic for programming, or whether it is generative AI for writing the next essay or the next blog post kind of thing, some people would tell you that like, hey, you're taking away the building block learning that people need to learn. But on the other hand, like, hey, with these abstraction layers, the building blocks they need to learn may be different than the building blocks they've learned in the past. And so we have to be agile and be ready for that. Right?
Yeah.
So I think generative AI is going to be goodness. But we'll have to think about like, what does this mean to the world? And how do we not get into a place where students don't know what it means to write something?
Yeah, understood. So I think one more person, Habibullah, do you have a question? Do you want to ask?
Yeah. Thank you very much for the call, Vish, as well as Somasegar. I also belong to 8286. Out of the 400 students, 300 students knows me. 300 friends knows me. Of course, I got introduced to Soma by Saravanan when we had 2050 get together in Chennai.
Yep.
I'm an entrepreneur based in Dubai, Ghana, and Qatar. We are into heavy industries. Also, we are into portfolio management and all that. Nice to meet you. I think after 25th year meeting, I'm trying to see you. Of course, we often speak about you. Nice to see all of you. Actually, we invested in crypto also. We made money, and then we are, of course, our returns from crypto as well as from portfolios is very good. We are doing very well. But my specific question to you is that I have a feeling, of course, we talked about Web3 as well as blockchain, all that will exist, will sustain, irrespective of whatever is happening this Friday man and all that. But on crypto, I have a feeling it will kill stock market. It will kill stock market in future. This is my call. What do you think on that? Because today, when you have a blockchain, what stock exchange is really doing it is come to the stipulations of a government. When I want to keep away from the government, I want to float my company in the blockchain, and I want to circulate my buy and bid, within ourselves. It can always kill stock exchange. What is your call on that?
Good question.
So it's a great question. I want to separate out the stock market from the stock exchange, from the concept of using stocks as a way to define and store value and to be able to exchange value. Okay. I think if you're a purist in the crypto world, you would absolutely.
I'll interpret for a minute. I have investments in India. I have investments in Dubai, in Qatar, and Ghana, and I cannot go to a specific stock exchange to float my shares. Rather, I want to make my stock within the blockchain. I want to offer the tradability among my friends. That's what is my call is in the crypto space. That's what I'm trying to do.
What a stock exchange does in my mind is like it sort of is a platform that brings supply and demand together, and the stock exchange platform is being run by a centralized source today. What you're reacting to is like, hey, I don't want a centralized. I want it to be decentralized. Hey, I'm the supplier, I'm the demand, and let me work with the other party and do it myself. Why do I need a centralized third party to do this for me? Right.
Exactly.
And you could argue the same thing about currency in general, right?
Correct. Exactly.
Today, today every country has got its its Federal Reserve Bank. At least in the past, they used to sort of think about currency in the context of the gold reserves that they had. With the last 20 years or 30 years or even 50 years of what is happening, the gold reserves don't seem to matter anymore, kind of thing. And so it's really like there is a Federal Reserve Bank in every country that is somehow deciding what the fiscal policy and monetary policy is, and you and I have really no choice but to sort of listen to that. And the question is like, hey, why do I need a third party, entity to do that? Why can't society figure it out by itself? Okay, and I think like there is a day that we all hope that the stock exchange is going to be like you and I deciding you have shares that you want to sell, and I want to buy shares in your company, and there is a way we decide what the value is, or the platform, given the supply and demand, decides what the value is, but it is not controlled or owned by any third party agency or third party thing, right? I think that could be a future, but the world that we live in is really run by governments. Okay, there is a way a particular government is elected, whether it's elected or whether it comes into existence by itself, and somehow the power for some of these things stay with the government, particularly from a currency perspective, not necessarily from a stock exchange perspective. Okay, and is the world ready for the change? When is that going to change? But the even more important question is that change going to happen in your lifetime or my lifetime? Or is it going to be because sometimes things change overnight, but it never changes overnight because there's a lot of build up that happens, and when it changes it feels like it's overnight, but for 20, 30, 40, 100, 200, 500, 1,000 years things have been building up to that, right? So I can't tell you when it is going to change. Okay, but if we truly get into a decentralized system that can scale to the level of transactions that the world is used to today and the world wants to continue doing, that's the day you could decide that hey, do I need the New York Stock Exchange, or can I have the Habibullah Stock Exchange for the Habibullah company shares kind of thing, right? That is not controlled by a New York Stock Exchange or Abu Dhabi Stock Exchange or a Mumbai Stock Exchange kind of thing. So I think conceptually it makes sense that getting to a decentralized world is likely goodness for everybody, but I don't know when it's likely to happen.
Yeah.
The pace with which it's going.
In fact, we recently started formal jewelry also called Richie Gold, based in Dubai, and we are trying to open our second showroom in Qatar and Abu Dhabi. Probably we are trying to have our own diversification. So what I was thinking, instead of going formally to a stock exchange, why don't you issue ourselves a crypto coins, our own retail backed by a balance sheet and all that. We can always have the top KPMG or Deloitte auditors, and then we can always float our shares through crypto platform for offering the liquidity and float it among friends. This is what I was thinking. That's what.
And I think that would be a great if you feel like hey, you could do that, and you feel like you can find enough demand for that, and that meets your needs. I think you should try it, because it'll be one of a unique kind of thing. And it'll also inform people what is possible, because you need path breakers like this to say I'm going to try new things, right? And that's a new thing that you should, if you think that's going to work for you, I'm a fan of saying no, please go try it out and see how it works. But more importantly, teach the rest of the world what is possible with a decentralized system.
Almost of 400 friends, 300 make a transit. I host them. Probably next time I should host to Soma also. Talk to Saravana about me. Saravana was speaking to me. I said, hey, about you.
Super. Super. Excellent. Excellent.
Thank you for
absolutely. Thank you.
Any other questions, folks, today? We're almost over 25 minutes away from our scheduled time, but it is an interesting discussion. I don't want to stop it, Soma. So there's a good flow of conversation between the audience and you. So unless there are any further questions, gentlemen, ladies, we will wrap up the session. Soma, thank you for joining. I know it is a little early in the morning for you in Seattle. Thanks for joining on a Wednesday morning. It was a very good discussion. I think a lot of people got a lot of value out of that. I got a lot of feedback informally already through the social media saying it was a good session, and people had a lot more questions they want to ask you directly. All I can say, Soma, from the past 17 speakers who had the experience, people get a flood of LinkedIn requests after the session. So be prepared for a deluge.
No, absolutely. But I'm also happy to tell people that if you have questions or you want to chat, or if you have things that I should be thinking about, kind of thing, please send me mail. My email address is soma@madrona.com. Feel free to send me mail, and I can tell you that I always read my mail. Sometimes it may take a day or two before I respond, but I'm also pretty good at responding to emails, kind of thing. But Vish, thank you again. Thank you and congratulations for doing what you're doing with CEG Connect, and thank you for having me here. Thanks for the wonderful conversation and discussion and questions, and all of your love and support. Thank you.
Thank you, Soma. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Vish, also.
Good night.
Thank you, Vish, for hosting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good night.